Hello, strangers. But it's funny, because you look kind of familiar. December 14th. Kind of a tradition around here. I'm not going to leave you hanging. This is story number 9. I was a marketing consultant in the late 2000s. It was a good job. It paid well, and I was all right at it. But it did call for a decent amount of travel. Heavier months, I spent 3 of the 4 weeks on travel. I didn't mind it at first, but by the second year, being on the move as often as I was, it was getting old. And part of how and why happened in this story. I was on the final leg of a 3-trip chain. The novelty of constant travel had well and truly disappeared. I was booking my flight back home when I saw a banner advertising a sale on tickets to regional airports. I looked, and what luck, my hometown's dinky municipal airport was on there. My hometown, where my parents still lived. After so much travel, the thought of having something familiar, solid, I didn't even think about it. I just bought the ticket and sent an email to my boss telling him I was taking some long overdue vacation time. He might think me extroverted to be as successful at a job like this as I was. But I like to think of myself as ambiverted. Oh sure, I could put on a good show, speak to a crowd of people, and be as confident as to pull it off. But it took me so long to recharge. Deep down, I was painfully shy, and once that social battery had been well and truly tapped, heaven and earth wouldn't get me to make a fuss or speak about anything. It was good that I was getting away and finally taking vacation, and a vacation in a place where I wouldn't feel pressured to meet new people and see new sights. A week home with my parents. That was just the thing, I thought. The night of my flight started well. I made it through ticketing and security, picked up an overpriced soda and magazine, and boarded with the familiarity of one who's zombie walked through this so many times before. My plane had a layover, but another stroke of luck. The same plane I was already seated on was the one flying to my municipal airport, ending up in my hometown. So after the first landing, everyone, save one flight attendant, gathered their things and disembarked. As this was on the sort of airline where there were no assigned seats, the flight attendant who stayed welcomed me to take my pick. The plane would, surprisingly, be full, and I was currently in a middle seat. At her suggestion, I moved over to the window, again smiling about my continued luck. It was fully dark outside, and as the plane rocked with air carts and fuel lines and luggage swaps, I dozed, only interrupted when I heard the first of the passengers begin the boarding process. A man with steel gray hair and the 90s style of sunglasses that looked like a solid visor across his face came down the aisle. He was walking like he was mad at someone, all in a rush. It stood out from how everyone else was moving at this late hour in this hushed airplane. I averted my gaze from the front of the jet and reopened the magazine I had on my lap, but it was too late. He made a beeline for my row, plopped himself down in the aisle seat, and deposited his carry-on in the middle seat. Ignoring my averted eyes and attention to something other than him, he loudly, really loudly in comparison to the dull hum and clunks I'd been listening to for the last 30 minutes, introduced himself. I looked up, thin smile at the ready, and realized he was much older than I'd clocked him to be. There were deep crow's feet and wrinkles behind the sunglasses, and the bleached gray silver job he'd done on his hair must have been a week or so old, showing dark roots that were salt and pepper speckled. I'd put him at early 50s, old enough to be my dad's oldest brother. After polite introductions, I tried to return to my magazine, but he just kept talking, launching into a forcefully cheerful interrogation of small talk. Where was I from? Was my trip a vacation? Was I still in school? I'd learned to be vague about personal questions. I had a set script I'd learned from all the sales pitches. Even though I still felt weird about the guy, I was able to rattle it off without much thought. However, I only got out the name of my firm before he interrupted me again to talk about his job. Fine by me. It was late. I was tired. I hadn't even wanted to talk to this guy or tell him anything about me in the first place. Well, turns out the man owned his own business. I smiled and nodded politely, but just kept trying to return to my magazine. I feared showing as small of an interest as looking at him would prolong or encourage this conversation further. But it didn't matter. Now that I was literally backed into a corner, he talked on and on. I kept my eyes on my magazine, reading and rereading the same sentence over and over, until my potential salvation appeared. Another man, apologetic, asking if the middle seat was taken. As suddenly as he had appeared, though, my escape was stolen as the first man, Mr. Talkative, huffing with indignity, gave up the aisle seat. Of course he wasn't going to let some guy sit between us, buffering me from his attention. In doing so, he moved his bag so aggressively he banged my shins as he thrust it under the seat in front of me. He did this so quickly I didn't have time to react. All he did to acknowledge both hitting me with his carry-on and taking my footwell without asking was to state, over my sound of surprise,
"You don't mind. You're shorter, and I need the leg room."
Now I was really trapped by his bag and his meaty elbow, which dug into my right side. I dropped my right arm against my side to break his contact with my chest. He didn't appear to notice this, but he kept the pressure on, leaning into my arm with his further. I quickly gave up on the shared armrest and was nigh clinging to the wall of the plane, but no matter how far I pushed myself to the side, his arm moved more and more, seeking me out, keeping a constant pressure on my side. It was so uncomfortable. I hated this strange man being in my space, touching me so insistently. But what could I do? It's a plane. Surely tall and big people have to deal with this all the time. I argued with myself, playing down the discomfort, even as it made me anxious, unable to really focus on anything else. The plane took off and reached cruising altitude, and as the light came on announcing we could get up, I excused myself to the bathroom, cringing against the seat backs in front of us to lessen the physical touch. Once in the bathroom and away from his presence, I rationalized it further. I told myself it's just an upper arm. It's not like he was groping me. And clearly, my jangled nerves from all the travel and my tiredness at the late hour, well, they were just making me read too much into it. And I just needed to calm down. After I had returned, he finally appeared to run out of words with which to brag about his company. The relief was short-lived as he then switched to talking about his passion projects, which, he added, he could tell I'd be into. He punctuated this by running a thick finger over the small tattoo I have circling my right wrist. I jerked my arm away, but he either pretended not to notice or didn't care. He was too excited to tell me and show me that he was a musician. As he dropped his hand down to his carry-on, he let it brush against my leg, and I froze. I knew this was off, and it was wrong, and I know he knew it too, but he was counting on me not wanting to make a scene. The forced intimacy of a plane, you know. It's you and 100 people clustered too close, stuck with each other. People are sleeping, minding their business, and now this man was daring me. Either I could do what he did, I could get loud, get insistent, and bother people like he bothered me. And then what? Everything could be so easily explained as accidental. if he didn't just deny it. And if he was oblivious, maybe to his mind it wasn't happening at all. I had the terrible feeling that he wasn't oblivious, that he knew exactly what he was doing and he liked it. But I couldn't know for sure. I hated this, hated him, but I resolved to accept the next 94 minutes of hell. At least then I wouldn't have to see him again. I was turning this over in my head as he pulled up the lid of his laptop and began to show me album covers. They were strange. They weren't dirty, but they were all of him, posed, button-down shirt unbuttoned kind of low, wearing like leather cuff bracelets and looking directly at the camera. I glanced, returning my gaze to my magazine each time only for another,
"Come on, look at this one."
or insistent elbowing prod. Fine, I thought. I'll look at your dumb pictures. At least you're not making me listen to... He moved his hand and pressed some combination of buttons. Twanging guitars erupted into the hush of the red-eye flight's reverie. This guy had his laptop volume maxed out, and now he was playing his music at me. Alarmed, I looked up at his beefy face and said, "Hey, don't do that. People are sleeping." The grin slipped as he huffed dramatically, mocking my dismay before dismissing me with another interruption. He told me he was being nice to me, and the least I could do was appreciate it by listening to a few of his songs. But this time, he was interrupted. It was the man in the aisle seat, who was under no such pressure to be nice. He told him to turn that crap off. The man's head snapped right. His whole personality changed. With me, he'd been pushy, in my face, and very aware I was backed up against a wall. With a man, one closer to his own age, now his tone was wheedling, higher pitched as he explained it was I who wanted him to play it. Aisle seat man did not care, repeated he needed to turn it off, and turned away. The man's arm was gone from its constant pressing at my side as he turned, squaring his sloped shoulders. This guy did not like being told what to do. As he started to talk over the man, a woman's voice came lilting in from behind us. Someone had summoned a flight attendant, who now repeated, nicely but firmly, the man's request to turn off the music. And with that, the man's shoulders dropped. Another quick move that sent his entire upper arm into my chest, and he turned facing front again. He banged his laptop shut, cutting off the music mid-warble. I was relieved at first, as part of the power he'd used to keep my quiet was, well, the quiet of the plane. But having disturbed it himself, that pressure was gone. The rest of the flight was strangely quiet. Either he'd finally figured out that he wasn't winning anyone over, or he was sulking and blaming the man, the flight attendant, or me. Take your pick. I didn't care which. When it came time to deplane, he was gone, rushing past the people in the rows ahead. I'd never been more relieved to have seen the last of somebody.
"Where's he going?"
I turned and looked to my right. The man that had come up and sat in the aisle was looking at me curiously. I shook my head. I was so tired, so ready to be over this, that I just said, "I don't know, and I don't care. I hope I never see him again." The man in the aisle seat was startled.
"Wait, you're not with him?"
I looked at him, too tired to explain, but just let my facial expression do the talking, one of revulsion. And the man shook his head slowly.
"I wish I'd have known. When you got up to go to the bathroom, he made a big fuss, told everybody around us that you were his girl and you were scared of flying. You mean to say he was pawing all over you?"
I felt sick. He hadn't been oblivious after all. It had all been a plan, and the audience around us not indifferent, not minding their own business. but thinking that they were doing right by me the whole time. It was all I could do to gather my things and get off that plane without screaming. I made my way to the lone women's restroom in the terminal. Again, regional airport means small airport. I took some time to dash water on my face and take a few deep breaths. As I emerged, though, there he was again, posed, one hand resting on the handle of his rolling suitcase, the other pressing a cell phone into his ear. The second he made eye contact with me, he started barking directions into the phone. Bring the car around kind of stuff. My stomach dropped with a sick, acid splash feeling. Was he waiting for me? My God, was he planning to follow me? Why? I took off towards the escalator, but even my brisk pace didn't help. He turned right after me and followed right on my heels. In the most mundane and yet horrifying way, this man was chasing me, and he was doing it in a way that no one who happened to see it would bat an eye at. Just as I heard his phone snap shut and him clear his throat behind me, I looked down at the foot of the escalator, and I saw the long ash blonde hair I'd grown up with, right down to the way the alligator clip was so precisely vertical, even at this insanely early hour. There were my mom and dad waiting for me. My parents looked excited despite the hour, but as I locked eyes with my dad, his expression changed as he took in my face. I bolted for them. The man, oblivious as always, ran up behind me, nearly knocking into my mom as he belatedly realized I wasn't making a dash outside, but to witnesses. Worse for him, witnesses who were firmly on my side. His rush and stop short did not escape my dad's notice. My dad pulled my mom and I close in less of a hug and more of a strafe, interjecting his body between family and perceived threat. The man rebounded, and again his personality changed like it had on the plane when the man in the aisle called him out. Now he was acting like a good old boy, just menfolk being menfolk here. He tried to give my dad a hearty intro and handshake. My father, one of the driest human beings alive, merely looked at the extended hand, then flicked his eyes back to my pursuer's face. I buried my face in my mom's shoulder, hugging her so tightly I couldn't hear what was said, but in peeking back, I saw the man from the plane slink away, out the terminal doors and, amusingly, over to the taxi stand, disappearing into a yellow cab. Bring the car around, he'd ordered. That should have been funny, but it left me wondering how much of what he'd talked about had been made up. Who even was that guy, aside from someone who took advantage of the captive audience of an airplane to rub up against a girl half his age at a push and follow her out of the airport? I thought about how all of my other travel ended. Me, alone, walking to a dimly lit lot or garage to get my car. How differently would this have played out if he'd been on any other flight? My mom caught on that something had happened, but waited until the car ride home to ask. In spite of the early morning and running on fumes, I ended up staying up, telling my parents what had happened. They were pissed, but what could they do? What could any of us do, really? It was upsetting to have been trapped and touched like that, but it wasn't serious enough to make a case out of it. On day 3 of my vacation, lounging in the living room and dividing my attention between a cop show, marathon, and my phone, I got an email. It was a business-based social media platform. In the early aughts, companies were big into pushing young professionals to be on business-based social media. As my eyes caught the name of the site, my stomach churned and dropped. My name, my firm's name, the only 2 pieces of information the man on the plane had not interrupted. Oh no. Sure enough, the message was from him. Messages, actually. 32 of them. My mom looked over and saw my face, immediately becoming concerned. The concern grew as I turned my phone screen to her, and she started skimming down the list. Despite it having been a full 3 days, he clearly hadn't forgotten about me and was now prodding me digitally. Gave me the creeps. Opening one of his later messages, I really wasn't sure what to expect. I saw no erotica, no overt grossness, but what started with a Bible verse and spooled into a strange stream of consciousness. This having been a while ago, my memory of the one message I read has been condensed down into a general summary. How pleased he was to have been able to share time with me. How he'd known there was such a connection from how into his pictures and music I had been, rewriting history to frame me as the one who'd sought his attention, and my reaction one of admiration instead of revulsion. I was shocked and disgusted. It must have been what reading a fanfic about yourself would be like. He had attached a picture to this message too. Thankfully, not one of his privates, but another glamour shot of himself, Gaussian blur and all. I clicked back into the inbox, selected all messages from him, and moved them to the trash. I felt like bugs were calling on me as I had to scroll to capture all of his messages and banish them away before finally blocking him. I've changed a few things since then. I got out of the consulting biz and moved to a more stable job at a different firm, which suits me fine. I further reset that social media to full private hidden, as my new job isn't near as pushy about the whole networking thing. And on the few business trips, conventions mostly, I do find myself attending, I now dress way down. The most noticeable part of my travel outfit is a large pair of over-the-ear headphones. And keeping those glued to my head means no more chances for info as innocuous as name and company can be gleaned from me again. It's a common fear, being afraid of flying. It's odd. I've done it so much in my careers that you might think I don't have that fear. And of flying, the act of being in the air, I really don't. But a shade of it, interactions like this one, well, let's just say I'm not afraid, but I am watchful. If you'd like to reach out, email and socials are in the description. Interacting with the like, comment, and subscribe features does something, allegedly. And otherwise, we'll meet again next Tuesday. Stay strange, stay safe, and take care, strangers.